Well, welcome to the Lance Wallnau Show. Today's going to be a very special show indeed. If you're a parent, if you got children, if you got grandchildren, pretty much covers the group I want to talk to right now. But I got my wife with me, but pay attention. I'm going to tell you what we're going to do in a minute. Annabelle, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And do you know that as I'm looking at the world around me and I'm saying there's a lot of instability, there's a lot of challenging situations, there are some things that you can do that can bring about stability for you. I just want to remind you before the year is over that there is a prophecy from Haggai that says, hey, the world may shake, but the silver is mine and the gold is mine. And I want to encourage you that we're having an unusual electoral hope has come out since the last election. The markets are moving up, but then you've got Europe. The crazy administration we've got right now is trying to almost provoke Russia to war. Within a moment, the economic stability of the world could be flipped upside down. And by the way, most nations are debt to GDP, meaning they're all broke, including the United States. We're like 130% debt to GDP. Is shocking. I mean, no one could run their home budget the way the governments do it on the earth. So you're living in an unstable time. I want to remind you, if the silver and gold is warned by Haggai to be God's stable investment, I believe it's wise for you to look into silver and gold. And so therefore, I always remind my friends, go to lancewallnau.com/gold and study the 25 pages on why it is that gold and silver have lasted for thousands of years as a stable store of wealth when money fluctuates up and down. You could take your IRS and you could have deferred taxes by utilizing it. All that's explained in this. Go to lancewallnau.com/gold. I might not be able to offer this after the new year. I'm thinking of doing something different. So I'm going to close out this 2 years. I've been pushing this, but I want you to know the door is open now. Go get the free report and do what you got to do. And you'll be glad you did, because there's wisdom in saving your money in something which is going to hold its value. Now, you know what is the greatest investment you can ever make is knowledge, and the greatest asset you can ever invest in is your family. Isn't that true, Annabelle?
Yes, Lance.
What's the most important mountain of all 7, Annabelle?
A family mountain.
She's been telling me this for years.
He's just starting to catch on to that.
And I'm just catching up. Well, try to protect yourself from the government, and the family mountain is the one that is the most valuable.
First in the Bible.
I have a special guest I want to bring right now into the conversation, Practical Parenting Guide. These are pastors that have written a guide for small groups and parents, pastors Ron and Lori Termale. And let's bring them on. Take a look at these chapters. I love it. It's good to see you guys.
Hi.
These chapters, I'm loving them. This book is like Annabelle's devouring it because it's a combination of easy talking points, plus you have small group discussion questions,
takeaways,
and then a place for personal reflection and notes. Mm-hmm. I mean, you really have put together all three in one. The parent tips. Now, Practical Parenting Guide. So I'm going to read the folks at home some of the titles for this. The buck stops with you. Getting rid of your baggage. Authority brings security. Priorities, persistent protection. I honestly believe it takes almost a lifetime of experience before you can write a book like this. But the beauty of it is whatever price you paid to learn these lessons, someone else can get them right now. What prompted you to write this book?
Well, we have 3 kids and 6 grandkids, and we've been pastoring for over 30 years.
Wow.
We ran a daycare in the house for 12 years while we were raising our kids.
Wow.
And then we opened the daycare at the church. We had a daycare for 15 years and had lots of families come through that. And then pastoring, Fairly Lodge Church for many years, we realized that there are a lot of parents that just don't have the tools that it takes to raise successful, godly kids. And so we've taken our own experience over the years, what we've learned, what has been handed down to us. And we said, a couple of years ago, it's taken a couple of years to write this book. So let's just write everything down, the principles from God's word, other stories that we have, real life stories that I think make the book so much more interesting.
Yeah.
And practical advice to help parents navigate, especially in the world that we live in. And in our life, and our kids who are all successful, they're all in church and church leadership, they all have great jobs, and they're happy. And we have 6 grandkids now. We thought, and we always had people saying, you should write something so that we can kind of have a model as to how to raise good kids. And so that's what we did.
Well, I'm smiling because my kids knew your kids going through school. So, folks, when I'm introducing these authors, it's not like I just met them, but your son Daniel and my son Lance were both going in the same class together. And every day, my son would come home with the latest Danny Termale story. It was hilarious. And your son was quite a source of entertainment in that classroom. And I'll have to have him on the show sometime to tell you his experience growing up with your children while you were trying to grow them up. But Lori, did you have any chapter here that was your particular contribution, or was this co-labored on every one, or did any one of them, did you push through yourself?
I co-labored, I guess, together with every chapter, but having experience running my daycare and having children come into my home, all the time. I wanted my home to continue to have the peace of God in it. And so I would kind of, a prerequisite for every family, I would do a 2-week trial period.
For the daycare?
For my daycare, to see not only how the kids were interacting with my kids that I already had, but also if the parents were a good fit as well.
Oh my gosh! So did you ever have to kick out the parent?
No, but it's funny because in my home I had structure, and there was peace in my house, and some of the kids were children of church families that we knew, and I know in their home, they were a different kid, and I was a little bit leery, but I said, let's just try it out. And when they came to my home, they were different kids. They didn't want to leave when the parents came because I just had structure. And I know the home that they came from was chaotic with no structure. And I think they felt that peace in my home and the security with structure and routine. And so...
See how many times she just said the word structure? So in one of the chapters, they talk about how they were pastor a church, they have a daycare in their home, their children go to school, there's sports, and they have a bedtime every day. And they have a real, my parents visited us when we had 3 small children. And
her dad's a doctor. Her mother was like an English teacher.
And they said, our grandchildren would really benefit from 2 things, consistency and structure. And I said, Mom, there was so much of that in our generation. We both skipped a generation.
I think we rebelled. My dad was World War II, an engineer. And when we met, we threw off all structure.
Oh, my gosh. But there's a piece in that chapter when you read about it. I mean,
there is. Absolutely.
No, I'm saying I was reading about it, getting an impartation, just reading it, because I was realizing... Because your benefit of it is like your experience.
Well, what chapter are you talking about? Which number?
I don't know what anything's called. I read. The point is, it's all about when they talk about how you can have it all, but everything has its place. So even if you have a daycare and you have a church, they're both pastoring while they have this home business, and their children are all going to school every day, and they come home and do their homework. But they go to bed. All right.
So I'm going to drill down on this. I'm going to go through this. We're going to go through this rapid style, okay?
Yeah.
Because I got 11 minutes. I can't believe the clock is moving that fast. No such thing as a bad child. Tell me what that is. Give me the skinny on that.
Well, I don't know if you guys remember, there was Father Flanagan, who Mickey Rooney played in the movie about the orphanage that he started. And he said that in the movie, Father Flanagan said, there's no such thing as a bad child, where, every person is created by God. So God doesn't create mistakes, and he's wonderful at what he creates, and the greatest gift that we have is a child. The problem is not children. The problem is how they're raised and the environment that they experience. And so, lots of parents, they get frustrated because some kids are strong-willed children, but they're not bad kids. their temperament might be different. So in the book, we talk about different types of children and some tips that you can use to navigate and help a child to overcome, the natural inclination that we have as sinners, right? So kids have some natural inclinations too, but God gives us advice and wisdom in His Word and how to take a child and different children act differently and behave differently.
Let me grab this one. Reasoning with a child. I want to talk to you. Tell me about that one. How is that? That sounds like it's connected to this.
Well, you can't reason with a child, right? When they're young. You just have to tell them what to do, and you have to teach them how to act. You can't reason with a child if you're next to a stove. You can't just hope that they're not going to touch the flame. You have to tell them you don't touch the flame. And there's sometimes when children get older where they understand, what's right and what's wrong, where they have reasoning ability. Now you can discuss things with children. But when children are young, you have to basically tell them what is right, what is not right, what you expect for their behavior. And we live in a world where, I took a lot of psychology in school, and the liberal thought is that you just kind of let kids raise themselves. They're little adults. They're in small bodies, but they're little adults, and that's not true. That's not true. You have to raise a child. You have to teach a child. You have to even teach them how to think. And the Bible gives us all those principles. Yeah.
I would say to my kids, you're still a child, and I know you don't like this decision that we're making as a parent, and that's okay. You don't have to like it. You don't have to understand it, but all you have to do as a child right now is obey. And someday, I can't expect you now to understand the why, because you're not a parent yet. And until you step into that stage of your life, you're not going to understand why mom and dad are saying these things to protect you and saying no when everyone else is saying yes. And so that was a rule. You don't have to agree. You just have to obey. And I said, mark my words, you're going to grow up and have kids someday. And you're going to say, Mom, you were right. Everything you did, I thank you, because you protected me from a lot of things that my friends got into that I never stepped into.
Very interesting. Annabelle, chapter 17 here says happiness is not the goal. What do you think of that?
Well, I just think sometimes, especially observing a lot of the single moms that I work with, they don't realize that you can't always try to make the child happy. I mean, I always did too. Like, my kids had a terrible diet. Like, as we got older and we found out about how I fed them the wrong thing, my son Lance said, I forgive you. So, we go out for donuts after school.
Oh, yeah, that's true. We had the Dunkin' Donuts run after Dayspring.
And that honeydew bear or whatever, honeydew donuts.
Donuts. Oh.
There's so much pressure on parents, and you're busy, and we tend to sometimes go with convenience versus what is right. So if your kid, if your kid wants to be on his tablet or on his phone 9 hours, 10 hours a day, because that's what makes them happy, do you just allow that because that's what makes them happy? Or do you, as a parent, say, this is not healthy for you? And so,
let me just break in and say something, because I almost forgot. This book is great for the holidays. When you get it for not only for yourself, but if you have a daughter, if you have a daughter-in-law, if you got, you got anyone who is parenting, or even grandparents, I think, can benefit from this. Now that I'm looking at this, because I can help coach my kids. They don't have time to read everything that I do differently. But you can get the book right now at lancewallnau.com/parent. And it has Christian concepts woven in perfectly so that a secular person will read it, but it'll give some biblical wisdom in it, and they'll start to go, well, because, parents, interestingly enough, are open to God after they have a child. I had a Jewish guy that shocked me. He called me up, a business partner of my dad's, said, what can you recommend for a church? You know, I'm Jewish, but we just had a child, and I'm thinking I want to raise him with some biblical teaching. And I was so thrown off, because when people have children, they're actually open to God. And these titles are so powerful. You've talked about strong-willed children. You've been discussing who runs the house, I think, and reasoning with a child. But your child has a destiny. This is part that I think is interesting. How do you deal with that chapter?
Well, you know, when we start the book, we talk about what do we consider a successful person? You know, is it how much money they make? Do we compare our children with our neighbors' kids, what the world says is successful? Or do we truly ask God, will you fulfill your will for my child? And so we believe that, as Christians, we believe that God has a destiny for every person. Mm-hmm. And, what's so awesome about the gospel is he'll take even someone that's broken and repair it, and that person will fulfill God's destiny if they live their lives for Jesus. And so we believe children have a destiny on their lives. And one of the most important things that we can do as parents, I believe, is number one, to pray for their salvation, and pray that even if you have a child that's walked away from God, your prayers as a parent are very powerful for them to return to the Lord and fulfill their destiny in God. And then there are practical things, we talk about in the book, where at our home, we filled our home with all kinds of stuff, fun stuff, instruments, sports. Skate parks. We turned our driveway into a skate park.
Pretty amazing.
That kids will have every opportunity to go towards their gifting, right. Like what's their gifting? Just think if Beethoven did not have a piano, and so, but as parents, if we can just kind of guide our children along a path and pray, God, will you have your will in my child's life? Because your child does have a destiny. Our church is filled with all kinds of people. We have some ex-gang members. We have the #1 Latino rapper in the world who used to be,
brother.
Who got saved and now is doing rap for, the Christian world.
I love it. Now, the pastoring is like a trip in itself. People don't realize I pastored for 20 years. I remember I had one guy, a gang guy, join our church, and I was teaching him how we're going to have an Ephesians burning of all occult and drugs and evil, paraphernalia and pornography. And we had this big burning thing. And Lewis gets convicted and takes out his gun and he throws it into the fire. And then I remember one of my elders goes, Pastor, not for nothing. If that thing's loaded, those bullets are going to go flying. We had to clear everyone out of the parking lot because Lewis threw his gun in the stupid furnace, and the bullets could have gotten active. But those are stories. I can't believe we're running out of time. What is this chapter here, chapter 7, the importance of a talk? What's that about?
Oh, yeah. It's good, Lance.
Well, our kids have things to say, and we live in a generation when parents are so distracted. Their job, social media, their phone, their computers. And it's so important for you to be present with your kids and to talk to them and to see what is important to their world. And they long for that. They long for that more than material things and toys, just the interaction with their parents, so they know that you're listening and that you're there and that you're present, and just to see into their world.
Man, that is so powerful. I was just go ahead, Pastor. Go ahead.
And this story is in the book. My family grew up in Italy when it was occupied by the Nazis, and my grandparents were murdered by the Nazis. And so I always wanted to know about my parents' background, and they never kind of, talked to us about it, and until later in life. But it intrigued me and what they went through, And I know it's like those stories that they had of their life and what they went through. If I believe if they had talked to me more when I was younger, it would have caused me to have maybe a greater appreciation for them, greater understanding.
What they went through.
Yeah, what they went through, and especially appreciation that my mom was an orphan on the streets of Italy, and her parents were killed, and she was starving, eating grass to live. And I wish they had talked to me more when I was younger, because I think I would have had a greater appreciation for them as my parents. And so I think parents need to find time to just talk with their kids. And your kids have a lot of stuff that they want to talk about, and maybe they're afraid to say things. You need to give them time so that they can open up. Like, what's their day at school going? Mm-hmm. Like, what's happening at school with them? Are they being bullied? How do you know what's happening unless you sit down and talk to them? So kids want your time more than anything else. They want your time. I love
that. Once again, the table of content, making memories, sexuality, when and how, daycare and education. They have big ears, how to invest in yourself, priorities, persistence, protection. I would tell you that if you only had one book to read about parenting, and I am a book connoisseur. I've got 10,000 volumes. This is the book I'd start with, because I think it's so current. It's practical to where the world is today. Annabelle, hold that book up one more time so people can see it. Parent Tips. Pastors Ron and Lori Termale, real life stories for parents in small groups, practical parenting guide. You've increased your capacity of having a successful family by at least 20%, 30% or more, just by having the knowledge of what not to do and what to do right. You even have a chapter on how to use the book. I mean, you've thought of everything. So they get it as a stocking stuffer. Go to lancewallnau.com/parent. And if they want to follow you on social media or follow your church, where do they go? We got a big audience out there. How can they keep hearing? I think you're bounding with wisdom today, my dear friend. So how can they hear more from you?
Well, they can go to Instagram and Facebook on Parent Tips Book. So that's the easiest way, Parent Tips Book. And every day we put something out there to give parents some helpful information for their day. And daily tips. Mm-hmm. But Parent Tips Book on Facebook and Instagram, that works.
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you what, we'll have another follow-up after the new year. And after we've had a chance to digest everything that's in the book, and then we're going to have a little family reunion. I'm going to have, maybe we'll get Lance on and your son Danny on. And
Carissa and Joy.
Carissa and Joy, my daughter Joy and your daughter, because I wanted to ask you, is it different raising girls than it is raising boys? And is there things that mom does to deal with the daughter that dad does? I wanted to talk to you about that, but that's the next show. We'll have you back, and we'll have the kids on, which I'm sure will embarrass all the adults. Thank you again. Remember, you can go to Lance Wallnau, go to lancewallnau.com/parent and get this book. And I guess if you're watching on Facebook and Instagram, I think Chelsea might be able to set it up for me. If I put the word parent, P-A-R-E-N-T, I'll send you a link, but you're going to go to Amazon. You're not going to go to, my page or their page. It's going to go right to Amazon where you can get the book. We're going to just move you quickly to get a hold of the book and get like 3 or 4 of them, stocking stuff it, and get it to your kids. You'll be glad you did. And I'll see you again tomorrow. Fair enough, Annabelle?
Salute.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Did you enjoy this latest episode? Please remember to share it with your friends, because the more knowledge you have, the better equipped you are to navigate the world.